for today's movie review, I'll be reviewing the 2009 direct-to-video animated superhero movie Wonder Woman, which at the time was the overall fourth film of the DC animated original movies lineup released by Warner Brothers Animation. As far as production details are concerned, the movie is directed by Lauren Montgomery, who I can best describe as being a jack of all trades within the animation industry, in the sense where she has been everything from a storyboard artist, a television director, a film director, a character designer, so on and so forth. And as far as her filmography is concerned, in regards to directing, as far as directing solo movies are concerned, Wonder Woman is her first movie she's directed by herself, followed by Green Lantern First Light, Superman Batman Apocalypse, Justice League Doom, to co-directing other installments ranging from Superman Doomsday, Justice League Crisis on Two Earths, Batman Year One. As far as other projects are concerned that she's worked on that have nothing to do with DC animation, she has worked on the Voltron reboot, Voltron Legendary Defender, to supposedly being the director of the upcoming theatrical animated movie based on the Avatar The Last Airbender series, Aang The Last Airbender. As far as other production details are concerned, the movie is a loose adaptation of the Gods and Mortals story arc from the 1987 run, plotted and drawn by George Pérez. And according to some sources, apparently an early cut of this movie received an R rating, but it was later recut to receive a PG-13 rating. And with that out of the way, one of the most baffling aspects about Wonder Woman is that, like I said in my review of the 2017 Gal Gadot Wonder Woman movie, is that despite Wonder Woman being one of the most iconic characters to hail from DC Comics, there isn't that much media surrounding her. Because when you look at characters such as Batman or Superman, they have appeared in countless TV shows and movies, no matter if the TV show or movie in question is live action or animated. I mean, dear God, do you know how many Batman movies there are? Thanks to both the live action and direct-to-video market, there's dozens. Wonder Woman, on the other hand, never got the same kind of treatment that Batman or Superman had. Because when you really look at Wonder Woman's filmography in regards to having it just be about her, she only has one TV show under her belt, which is the Linda Carter series from the 1970s. And even though there have been multiple attempts to bring the character back to television, most of those projects were canceled. And as far as movies are concerned, technically speaking, this is not even the first movie to be about Wonder Woman. Because apparently in the 1970s, there was a TV-made movie that came out in 1974 based on Wonder Woman. However, from my understanding, it seems like it was a in-name only adaptation, given that the character herself was depicted more as a James Bond type super spy as opposed to being this Amazonian princess. And if we're taking the 1974 TV-made movie into consideration, 35 years later, we would end up with this movie, which as far as I'm concerned is the first real movie to be about Wonder Woman. And originally a sequel was planned, however, it was canceled due to poor DVD sales of this movie. And we wouldn't even get another straight-to-video animated Wonder Woman movie until 2019 with Wonder Woman Bloodlines. And then, of course, you would have the two live-action Gal Gadot Wonder Woman movies. However, with Wonder Woman 1984 gained negative reception for both critics and movie audiences alike, we're not sure entirely when Wonder Woman will make her next cinematic appearance, or direct-to-video appearance. And I'm sorry for that entire side tangent, but the more important question is, out of all of the Wonder Woman movies to exist, does the 2009 animated Wonder Woman still hold up? As for the plot of the movie, on the mystical island of Themyscira, a proud, strong warrior race of Amazon women lives in a utopian society shielded from the corrupt world of man. But a betrayal within the Amazon sisterhood leads to the escape of Ares, the god of war. And now it's up to the Amazon princess Diana to capture him, before he unleashes global chaos and destruction, with the aid of cocky fighter pilot Steve Trevor. While traversing the world of man, can Diana and Steve Trevor build a bridge between the Amazons and the rest of the world while searching for Ares, or will the God of War succeed in destroying Earth itself? Now, in terms of what I liked about this movie, the voice acting cast for this movie is really good, with Wonder Woman herself being played by Carrie Russell of The Diplomat fame, who does a really good job of going back and forth between being serious but also naive at points throughout the movie. Then you have Steve Trevor, who's played by Nathan Fillion, who technically needs no introduction considering he's pretty much been in a lot of nerdy related content ranging from Firefly, Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog, to appearing in a couple comic book movies here and there. And although his depiction of Steve Trevor is very different from the comic book counterpart in terms of personality, I think the personality they give him in this movie works within the confines of the story, given that Steve Trevor in this movie, for a majority of the time, is a sleazebag. But when some of the more serious moments happen, he does drop the sleazeball act and actually becomes a bit more mature during those scenes. Although I think the scene stealer of the cast would go to Alfred Molina of Spider-Man 2 fame, playing the role of Ares. And although Ares is a very straightforward, evil to be evil bad guy who wants to conquer Olympus, Molina just gives him a lot more personality than what is required for the source material. It also seemed like he was having fun playing the character, because it seems like anytime he appeared on screen, verbally he's just chewing the scenery left and right when the occasion called for it. Another aspect of the movie I liked is the action, because this movie is very tight paced with its action scenes. There's plenty of them. Sure, I do think the action during a climax is a little weak, but I think the action scene throughout the movie is pretty good. Perhaps my favorite fight scene in the entire movie is the fight between Diana and the demigod Deimos that occurs midway through the movie. I thought that one just had the best fight choreography and the best use of locations seen over the course of that fight. Another aspect of the movie I liked is the animation itself, because for something that's a straight-to-video movie, the animation is a lot better than it has any right to be, and holds up very well to this day. Everything from the way the characters are animated in terms of their movement to even a lot of the CGI used in this movie, which I'm usually not a big fan of, is very well animated. Sure, it's not the best-looking CGI, but it's only in the movie sparingly, and I think a lot of the backgrounds look great, especially when we're at Themyscira. That's probably the best the movie looks in some areas. But perhaps one of the best aspects of the movie is the writing, because not only is the writing tightly paced, but it's also really well written in that sense where the characters are written in a way that you understand them immediately. Each character goes through a really good story arc. Even some of the minor characters manage to go through their own arc, like Alexa, who starts out as this minor character who's established being a barkworm that hates the idea of fighting, but she has a big moment during the climax, even if it is a little short-lived in some ways, and fully embraces the warrior heritage of being an Amazon. And that's just for a minor character in this movie. Then you have the character development for both Diana and Steve, which is done very wonderfully in that sense where you have Steve Trevor, who starts out being a womanizer, while Diana starts out being very naive, and as the movie progresses, they both become better people by the end. But I think one of the best aspects about the writing is the social commentary, because it feels like a lot of movies in this day and age focus more on the commentary than the actual narrative and characters. But for this movie, it focuses on the character's narrative first, and the social commentary is second, like a movie should be. And even then, the social commentary is interweaved with the narrative and characters, to a point that it doesn't feel distracting when it comes up. Because when it does show up, it feels like it shows up at the right moment, at the right time. And speaking of the social commentary, I should probably discuss what the actual social commentary is about. Because this movie is ultimately about gender equality. Because you have a lot of these movies with like a feminist agenda where they're all about girl power, put the man down kind of thing. This movie actually tackles the issue very well, where it's not really so much about girl power, it's more about trying to bring balance and bridge a gap between men and women. And it's done in a very smart way, because near the beginning of the movie, you have Diana asking her mother, why can't they reconnect with the world of man? And her mother straight up shows her Ares, who's imprisoned at Themyscira, saying, we must ever remain vigilant. Basically saying that all men are like Ares, in that sense where you should accept the nature of men as it is, vile, wicked, and untrustworthy. And a few minutes later, we would get a scene where we get introduced to 3 fighter jets with Steve hitting on a female squad member of his, while the other male squad member tells the female squad member, in a joking manner, better be careful of him, he's the kind of guy your mother warns you about. And I think it was smart for the other co-pilot to be male, because if it was a case where you had two female jet fighters with Steve, I think the message would have been a little too much, but I think they did the smart thing by having a male character deliver that line of dialogue at Steve, kind of showing that the Queen's logic in that moment is a little flawed. And to fast forward to midway through the movie, after we see Diana encounter that little girl who's forced to play the damsel in distress, which leads into that one scene where Steve and Diana encounter at a conde, asking Steve to pick up a pen for her, with Diana going, what's wrong with you? You look healthy. You could pick it up yourself. And basically, Diana kind of comes to the wrong conclusions about the world of men in regards to how women are being treated at the moment, where she just thinks women in this world are either being talked down to or being brainwashed into playing certain roles, with Steve replying, let's fight one social evil at a time. Then you fast forward to the moment sometime before the climax of the movie where you have Diana and Steve arguing with each other at the hospital after failing to stop Ares the first time around. And Diana gets furious because Steve chose to save her instead of saving the world, because she thought Steve viewed her as a damsel in distress at the moment. And Steve puts his foot down saying, no, I didn't save you because you're a damsel. I saved you because I care about you. Showing a more chivalrous side to him, and even point out the flaws in her logic, saying that you've been here for 15 minutes and you think you have men all figured out. It even goes further in saying that what her mother did was very cowardly, because it's not fixing the problems between men and women, it's actually creating problems. Really showcasing that the problems isn't as black and white as she initially thought. It's a bit more complex. And then you have the character of Persephone, who plays an interesting part in the narrative, not just as the secondary antagonist and love interest for Ares, but also being another contributing factor to the social commentary, because during the climax of the film, we see her get into a fight with Queen Hippolyta, and the moment Queen Hippolyta kills her, she states that you turned your back on your sisters. I give you peace and freedom from the world of man. Meanwhile, Persephone responds with, yes, we might be warriors, but we're also women too, who also crave marriage and children, putting a lot of the blame on Hippolyta, because although some women out there don't necessarily want to have children or be married, there are definitely some out there who do want to be married and have children. Again, showing that gender roles in our society aren't as black and white as it seems. Not only that, but I also see the character of Persephone being a sad reminder of what women are like today within the dating culture sphere, in that sense where you got some women out there who want to date the bad boy because, as the character Alexa said in the movie, the heart wants what the heart wants, even that which is worst for it, resulting in them choosing the bad boy on purpose. Or you got some women out there who want what other people have and crave marriage and children and get into a desperate situation where they end up with a bad boy, resulting in a toxic relationship. So, in a sense, Persephone is a cautionary tale in that regard. I say this because I know someone that's in a situation like that. Not gonna reveal who, but that's the short of it. I could keep going, but I think you get my point. Another aspect of this movie I liked is the fact that I think this movie does the Diana hunting down Ares plot better than the 2017 Wonder Woman movie, because when you look at both this and the 2017 Gal Gadot Wonder Woman movie back to back, they do have a very similar kind of plot structure where you have Steve Trevor crash landing on Themyscira. This prompts Diana to go into the world of man to hunt down the God of War while learning about the current world of man and coming to their own conclusions about it while fighting Ares. Sure, the execution is done very differently in terms of both setting and thematics, but I think this movie sticks the landing better, because this movie, as I just talked about for the past several minutes, has a lot of these thematics that are being played in the background of the movie that do come through the story and characters in a way that made sense. Whereas the 2017 movie, it seemed to have an idea of what it wanted to say, but then during the last act of the movie, it seemed to just stab itself in the back. It switched out what was an interesting idea for Diana's character arc to have an internal struggle and switch it out with an external struggle. Even the whole hunting down Ares plotline was handled better here because Ares is a recurring presence from the get-go. We get to see what he's like, and the plot beats that revolve around him made a lot of sense. He's first and foremost the main villain, and we see that he's the main villain. Whereas the 2017 Wonder Woman movie, we're under the assumption that he's somehow alive, and we keep coming back to this historical figure in the form of General Ludendorff along with his second in command, Dr. Poison. And for a good chunk of the movie, it makes you want to think he's Ares for some reason. And in between all that, we have Diana meeting all these other characters who you don't think is going to be a major character at first. Then you fast forward to the last third of the movie where you have Diana killing off General Ludendorff, and you think, okay, she's under the impression that this guy's Ares, the war is over. But then you have this other character show up revealing to be Ares himself, and it just kind of took me out of the movie because the whole entire movie tried to make you think Ludendorff was really Ares, while in reality it was this other character the entire time. It just didn't stick the landing for me. Whereas this movie was at least consistent with the way it utilized its villain. Now, as for an aspect of the movie I have mixed feelings on, has to do with the movie's pacing, because from the time this movie begins, the movie kicks it into high gear, and the next thing you know, you're at the climax with Diana fighting Ares at the Lincoln Memorial. So the movie does a good job of giving you a very tight-knit story. The problem that I have with it is that the movie is literally about 75 minutes long. I think the movie would have been better if there were another 10 to 15 minutes. That way it could have really fleshed out certain aspects of the story and also provide some breathing room between action scenes. Because there's a point in time where you have Wonder Woman battling this demigod named Deimos, and after that battle, we immediately jump to another action scene where she and Steve Trevor ambush a bunch of soldiers from the cult of Ares. And I think we could have had maybe a 2 to 3 minute scene of them flying towards that location, having some kind of banter between the two of them about the modern world in some shape or form that would have touched on some of the social commentary. Because as the movie sits, when you really do watch those action scenes occur back to back, it almost feels like you're missing a scene that should have been there. Which also leads into another problem that I have with the movie, which I'll talk about later. Another aspect of the movie I have mixed feelings on are some of the character designs. And I know with comic books, character designs get changed all the time. Wonder Woman would be no exception. But as far as Wonder Woman's design in this movie is concerned, it's very reminiscent to the design she had around this time period in both the comics and the Justice League cartoon, where she had essentially what some people refer to as the swimsuit costume, and she looks great and recognizable here. And as some of the other characters are concerned, like I mentioned earlier with a character like Deimos, again, isn't quite a one-to-one representation of what he looked like in the comics, but he has enough of the general motif and characteristics that it is still recognizably Deimos. But then you get to some characters like Ares and Hades, because with Ares, although when we see him in his normal form, he looks fine, but the moment he puts on the armor near the end of the movie, that's kind of where it loses me, because the armor he wears doesn't usually look like his traditional armor he wears in the comics, since the armor he wears in the comics usually has like this cobalt blue design to it, whereas these red piercing eyes, yet here his armor looks reminiscent to that of the armor Hades sometimes wears in the comics or certain cartoons, but then transforms into this giant monster that looks less like a Greek god and more like a Oni demon from Japanese mythology, which just looked a little odd to me. But then you get a character like Hades, and what did they do to him? He looks nothing like the one from the comics. If anything, he looks more like Dionysus than he does Hades. Now, in terms of what I disliked about the movie, this kind of goes back to the pacing a little bit, but because of how fast-paced this movie is, there are some concepts and ideas that are introduced, but aren't fully fleshed out or don't really have enough time to develop. Or if they do, it's done in a very underwhelming kind of way. For example, during the prologue of the movie, it's established that Hades had enslaved the Amazons at some point. Fast forward to the climax, when you have his army battling the Amazons, there is a moment where he does conjure up an army of dead Amazon warriors, which is a nice callback to what was established during the prologue. However, the Amazon Dead, which sounds like an installment of the Evil Dead franchise, get introduced and they do fight the Amazons, but and as cool as it was to see the Amazon Dead, they don't last very long, to a point that I kind of wondered why they were even introduced in the first place. No joke, the moment they're conjured up, maybe a minute or two later, they just disappear. It just felt like a very underdeveloped idea. There are a few other examples, but I think you get my point. Another problem I have with the movie is the climax, which is something this movie has in common with the live-action 2017 Wonder Woman movie, but I thought the climax was handled better here than it was in that movie, because at least the climax here felt a little more consistent than the live-action version. But get off topic here. My gripe with the climax is that I think it happened too fast, because the moment Hades gets his powers, suddenly he just unmasses this army out of nowhere at the Abe Lincoln Monument. I'm just sitting there wondering, when and where did this army show up? There's just no explanation. It's just, we're suddenly at the Lincoln Memorial and here's this giant army with no explanation. And then a few minutes later, the Amazon army also shows up. Again, going back to what I said about the movie being a little too fast-paced, it just feels like it was just missing scenes that, again, could have fleshed out certain bits of the story, because it just feels like plot holes do start to occur, mainly near the climax of the movie, in terms of setting up the climax. And another problem I have with the climax is that while I definitely thought the climax here was handled better than the 2017 Wonder Woman movie, it's just when comparing the action scene that occurs in the climax to the rest of this movie, I just don't think the action here is as engaging as the action that we see throughout the movie. So for my final verdict of Wonder Woman, while I wouldn't consider this movie to be perfect by any means, I do consider this movie to be great. On top of having some pretty stellar action scenes, the movie is at its best when exploring the dynamic between Diana and Steve, considering that a lot of the movie's main themes are explored through them. A lot of themes and ideas surrounding gender role that I still think are very relevant in today's society. And although the movie is very fast-paced, I do think the movie could have been an extra 5 to 10 minutes longer to pad out certain scenes and plot points that could have fleshed out the story in some ways, especially during the last act of the movie. And out of any movie to be based on Wonder Woman, I consider this one to be the best. So overall, the 2009 animated Wonder Woman movie I think is great and worth watching. And before I go any further, what did everyone else think about the 2009 animated Wonder Woman movie? So it looks like the movie got generally good reception. And so for my final rating of Wonder Woman, I'll give it a 4 out of 5. So what storyline from the Wonder Woman comics would you like to see adapted next in a straight-to-video DC movie? And see you later.